Greetings and welcome back to Christian News and Views. This is episode 85, and we're talking here today about Friday recap. And my name is R. Frederick Riddle, and this is a podcast that brings you the news with a Christian viewpoint and where the opinion is separated from the fact. And I want to reiterate some things I'm going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at Monday through Thursday. And so on Monday, there was two pieces of information that I talked about. One was the Ukraine and one was DOGE, the Department of Government Expense. So on the subject of the Ukraine, senior American and Russian officials at the time, on Monday, they were planning on having talks the following day, which would be Tuesday. They were concerning first U.S. and then Russian relations, including a future meeting of President Trump and President Putin. And here's the opinion I gave at the time. This is not the surprise I was expecting, but it is a surprise. It appears that the diplomatic effort has at least two parts. Part one, restoration of U.S.-Russian relations. And I'm going to put a little opinion in right here, right now, and I think that's important. Back to the, well, this is actually an opinion anyhow, but that's my additional opinion, if you will. I think it's a very important thing. Instead of isolating Russia, the new effort appears to rest on diplomacy. Now, I got to confess something here. I am not a fan of diplomacy. It is a nice word that promises peaceful negotiations. However, it often, and let me emphasize that, it often results in the good guy, that's us, losing to the bad guy, that's them. So that said, I believe that President Trump is very aware of the pitfalls and is confident in his abilities. I am also confident that if anyone can make it work, Donald Trump is the man. It is also apparent that eventually Kiev must be included. Any kind of plan that the United States and Russia come up with, agree to, will not stand on its own. It's going to have to involve and get Kiev's agreement. It's also going to have to involve and get NATO's agreement. And this is not the same world we live in now, thanks to Biden. It's a much worse world. And politically speaking, there's even more greater opportunity of a misstep than before. Because when Trump was very active, very energetic, very, in his first term, he went out, he saw a need, and he went out, and you can call him a bully if you want, but the thing is, well, I'll use that term, he bullied the other nations into stepping up. Well, Biden came along, and he didn't step up. In fact, he stepped back. And the United States became more on the sidelines. And the other nations, though, they did step up as a result of Trump, and they did start doing things more so, taking more responsibility. And part of the reason for that is that in the case of Ukraine's a next door neighbor, really. And Russia breathing down their necks. If Russia wins in the Ukraine, what assurances does NATO have? The United States, really, although President Trump is now in charge, he's only going to be in charge for 4 years. We don't know who's coming after him. So you need to have confidence in the people around you and the people who are saying, well, we're going to support you in this and that. And right now, that's going to be a hard thing for Donald Trump to sell. He can sell himself, and he can sell where the government's going to be during his term. But he to sell the idea of the United States having their back, so to say, uh, going forward after him, it's going to be hard because the Democrats, they're in disarray right now, and they may end up, the Democratic Party itself may end up going kaput, but the liberals will still be there. They'll just form a new party, and it will be sneakier, more subtle, and more dangerous than ever. So the liberals are not friends of representative democracy. In fact, they even refuse to call it that. They call it a democracy, which, when you look at democracy, it's basically mob rule on a national basis. And so I don't see them feeling bound by anything that Trump does. And so if they ever get back in power, and if you study your Bible, it does seem like they do. The Bible doesn't talk about the United States, but it does talk about a very weak West. And right now, with Trump, he's sort of like the backbone, you might say. And he was. And he's going to try to assert that again. But it's a little bit different playing field now, and I don't know if he's going to be able to accomplish that. First of all, he's got so much of what Biden did or didn't do that he has to undo. And so we'll just have to wait and watch on that. But that said, getting back to Kiev must be included. Here's what the Trump administration said. Actual peace with Ukraine would only take place with Ukraine's involvement. So I'm going to take a wait. I said this then, and I'm going to say it again. I will take a wait and see attitude for now. This has risks, but also great reward, and it is worth the wait. Now here's an additional note. The meeting did take place on Tuesday, and the president has come down hard on Ukraine. I will hold to the idea that he is playing a game of chess. He also uses deception so that his opponent is off balance. As a conservative, I like decisiveness. But as a Christian, I support Ukraine. They are fighting for their lives as well as their national identity. Russia came in there. You can, even if you blame the war on Ukraine, you cannot exonerate Russia from what they did. They went in, they murdered people, they raped women, they killed babies. They bombed schools, hospitals. This is all on public record. So I don't know how all this is going to go down. I do not pretend to understand what Trump is doing. I'm trying to make sense out of it. And so I'm in sort of a quandary. To add to that, not only am I a conservative and I'm a Christian, but I'm an American. And I liken their battle against a superior foe or a bully to our own rebellion against British rule, where the king acted like a bully. It was something that we didn't. You could have said the same thing back then. We could have. All we had to do was to let the king have his way, and we would have spared ourselves a war. But then we wouldn't have the United States. I don't know what we'd have. A mess, probably. All these emotional responses that I'm having to what's going on in the world are probably emotions that many of you are facing at the same time. It's confusing. And I would say to you that, well, let's see, let me rephrase this. All these emotional responses have me rooting for Ukraine, while at the same time hoping that President Trump does have a plan, and I believe he does, that will be acceptable to the Ukrainian people and to the NATO countries. Right now, it doesn't seem like it. He can dictate to them. But the only country that he has control over how they're going to go is the United States. And the United States is not as strong militarily or politically as it was when he left office. Again, the Biden administration frittered away much of what Trump had gained. They sat on the sidelines. They said, "Oh, we support Ukraine." They put the words out there of supporting Ukraine, but I don't believe they ever really truly supported Ukraine. It's my opinion. I believe that resulted that lack of commitment resulted in what I call slow walking. They slow walked their decision making process. They slow walked the delivery process, and yes, they did deliver, but Ukraine suffered and is uh, not in a very strong position right now. I wouldn't be surprised that it'll change. It seems to change every year. In reading the newspaper today, you would think that Ukraine's about ready to collapse. Well, I'm not so sure that's true. Uh, there is a will there, a will to survive, and you can't. That's something that's hard to quantify, hard to, to measure. United States, before it became the United States, when it was just American colonists fighting against British rule, they lost battle after battle, but they bought time. Those battles bought time, and they began to find ways of beating the British. And finally, they caught them flat-footed and defeated them, and we became an independent country. Well, Ukraine has done much of the same thing. They've had to battle. They are outnumbered, but they have not been outsmarted. And in spite of what the papers say, I still think that they have an opportunity to win. Can they do it without the United States? It's going to be difficult, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. These are people who want to be independent, do not want to be under Russian rule. And just as true for them as it was for us back in the 1700s. So in my opinion, it just is a very emotional time for us as to we want Trump to succeed, and we believe that he has a plan. Many people are trying to dissect that plan. I don't think it's no matter what they do, whatever they think, they're coming at it with some preconceived ideas. If I was going to try to decipher it completely right now, there's some assumptions I'd be making that may not be true. So I'm going to take, and I encourage you to take, you may not like it, but wait and see. Because right now it's very confusing and very much in flux. The United States, Trump is keeping Zelensky informed. That in itself suggests that what we see and what we hear may be leading us to some conclusions that are not true. Because if he's going to convince Zelensky, there's going to have to be some guarantee, some kind of something that he can give to the Ukrainian people that's going to make them say, okay, we will trust you. They've had 4 years in which they've learned not to really trust the United States. Yes, they want United States weaponry, but they would like to have it sooner, and maybe not so dumbed down by the time it gets to them, and actually arrive on time. So there's so many different things that are in play here. So I would encourage you to be more of a wait and see attitude. The other subject that on Tuesday we talked about was DOGE, D-O-G-E, Department of Government Expense. And that's been making its own headlines. We're not going to go into the headlines here, but just my opinion. The courts have already gotten involved in this situation and probably will get more involved in the future. So while I support the DOGE mandate to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, I will be watching this closely. Oh, by the way, I'm going to throw this out there. I wasn't planning on it, but I just read something in the paper this week in which people are still claiming that Trump did not get a mandate. And so what they point out is that one writer said he only got 2.4% of the vote more than his opponent. Another one said it was 1.5%. It doesn't really matter. When you're dealing with a mandate, percentages can be deceiving. Look at the numbers. The numbers tell it all. He won by over 2 million votes. You say that's razor thin. No, the popular vote went to him by 2 million. That's in spite of New York and in spite of California, which have the vast majority of state population when compared to other states. The other thing is that about that is that he won the Electoral College. When our founders founded this country, there was a reason why they established the Electoral College, and they would be patting themselves on the back right now. But what they did worked. It leveled the field so that the little states had as much of a say in this election as the big states. Just because a big state has a lot more people doesn't make their vote any more important than, say, Maine uh, or Alaska or New Mexico or any state that's not their size. And it leveled the playing field and gave everybody sort of an equal opportunity. You could call it equal opportunity politics if you want, or voting, elections. So to say it wasn't a mandate is just outright silly. And they're grasping at straws. So their thinking is, well, we lost the election, we're in disarray and everything. The best way to get out of disarray is do what we do best, which is to attack. And so they're attacking. But they're doing it in a foolish way. They're not making any sense. Back to the subject, though. Closely related to this, to the Doge, is the mass firings. It is my hope that Doge or the White House will quickly develop a soft landing for those people who were caught up in the mass firings. People went out, and it was true that the government opened up and made itself a prime employer, which is not the purpose of government. And so they hired a lot of people. Is it those people's fault they had got those jobs? No. Is it those people's fault that that those jobs really could be done by computers or some other means? No. The whole thing is that this is a shift, a sudden shift, a necessary shift that must take place. So I am praying and I am hoping that the Trump administration will look at this and look at what's happening to the people and provide soft landings. Now, they did try right off the bat. They tried to by offering a buyout. Not that many people took it. Some did, quite a few people, but not anywhere near as the majority of them. And then the courts got involved and made things even more difficult. So then we end up with this mass firing, and the courts will probably get involved in that as well. So it gets to be a little bit messy, but the house cleaning is necessary. But I'm hoping that these innocent people who are inadvertently impacted, that somehow the government will find a way, a legal way, of providing a soft landing for them so they can land on their feet and keep on moving. Tuesday and Wednesday, we just continued on with the what's going on in the Ukraine, and I've already commented on that. Now we get to Thursday. Now, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I had talked about in previous episodes about renaming Thursday. And I came up with a name. I call it Bible Talk. Why? Well, Bible Talk is what we do. We talk about the Bible, the King James Bible in particular, but we talk about the Holy Scriptures. We have talked about how the Scriptures came about, how they were edited and copied from the original to a copy to a copy to a copy. We can honestly say today that the copies we have today in the King James Version are based as well. Actually, you say the Textus Receptus is the same as it was back in the days of Christ, in the days of the apostles. How can we say that? Because of the way they copied. They took it extremely seriously. And so today we have an extremely reliable Textus Receptus, and the King James Version is a reliable translation of the Textus Receptus. And so this is something that we talk about. We also talk about the life of Christ and other things. And anything associated with the Bible is a subject material for this day. So I call it Bible Talk. Now this past week I talked about biblical English. And I do want to show you this. This is another book by Stringer, Dr. Phil Stringer. And right here, a nice cover there, by the way. Biblical English. It's a very interesting title, and he chose that title for a reason. Because many people, when they attack the King James, they talk about, oh, you're using Elizabethan English. You're using the English that is from the 17th century, and that is no longer valid. That is outdated. Well, the problem is, folks, that it is not 17th century English. It is not Elizabethan English. That for some 300 years prior to that, it had been that kind of English had been going down and being that was going down, and a newer English was taking its place. And so the English we have today was coming on already. And so that was not 17th century. What it was, and this was revealing to me the more I studied, I had not realized this. But what they did is they wanted to have the English reflect the Old and New Testament, the Old Testament Hebrew and the New Testament Greek. And so it's unique. And it draws from those two sources, Old Testament Hebrew and New Testament Greek. For an example, the these and thous. We always hear about them. They're a good example of this. In the Hebrew and Greek, the words thee and thou are singular words, whereas ye and you are plural. Sounds basic, but when you move to the more modern English, everything is converted. So when in the newer Bibles that have made that transition, they just substitute the word you. Well, the problem is that you is plural, not singular. So when you change them to simply you, the full meaning is missed. And what the translators wanted to do, and what Stringer makes this statement, and that the translators were not interested in an easy read or providing a language of the day. Does that sound familiar to you? Reading as many modern Bibles do. I can't tell you how many times I have heard people talk about these more modern versions. They are in the language of the people. People now can understand it. Well, you know what? When the King James Version came out, the people had difficulties understanding it. But it was important to them. Knowing the Word of God was important to them. So they, whatever struggles that were required, they made them. They learned the language. They learned how to speak it. I was not born speaking biblical English. I was not even born with speaking American English. It was wah, wah, feed me, and things of this nature. We had to be taught as children. Well, when I got saved, I was already reading the Bible, so in my process of just reading the Bible, I had picked up a lot of different things about the language of the Bible. But when I got saved and started hearing it preached and taught and so forth, and I took courses in different aspects of the Bible, I learned more and more and more. Am I an expert on it? No. But what I'm trying to say is that I learned it because I wanted to learn it. Not because it was the language of the day. And that is the same thing that they faced back then. It was not their language, but they went about it and learned. They took the time to learn, and it really didn't take that much time. You start reading it over and over again, you start picking up the these, the thous, and the you, the ye's, and and so forth, all these different ways of saying things. It is something that's important to know if you want to know the Bible. And so you put the effort in. This is why another argument people say, well, children can't understand it. Well, I beg to differ with you on that. I have taught Sunday school, and I've taught sixth grade, but I've seen kids younger than that. My wife taught fifth grade, and we both saw kids younger than that who could actually quote the Bible, sometimes better than us adults. They could quote the Bible, and not only quote the Bible, but explain the verse they quoted. They were kids. Well, how did they come across that knowledge? They put in the effort. They wanted to know it. They were coming to their parents were bringing them to church, and they were learning it there. Probably good, and the more solid homes, they were probably being reinforced, and the parents were probably helping them to understand different aspects of the language and stuff like that. Other homes, maybe not so much, but they still learned. We worked with kids who were in what you call church kids, and they were used to church, and so it came easier to them. But we also worked with kids who we used to call them bus kids, where they brought them in by the bus loads actually. I lived up in Michigan. I lived in Pontiac, and so some churches would, in that area, they would send buses into the outskirts of Detroit, maybe even further, and bring them to their church. And the kids, a lot of times, you're taking them right out of their own environment, putting them in a different environment that they did not know, did not really understand. But the more they came, the more they became assimilated to it, the more confident they came to it. We did a little experiment in the church I was at. At first we tried to blend the two groups together, the church kids and the bus kids. That wasn't working out quite well. The church kids were intimidated by the bus kids, and believe it or not, the bus kids were intimidated by the church kids. And so both groups suffered. When we separated the two groups and started to teach them more in their own safety net, if you will, they prospered and they grew in their knowledge and they began expressing themselves. We kind of expected that in the church group age. I mean, you figured that they had their act together. What was a real shocker, a real surprise, and a pleasing surprise was that the kids who came in by bus suddenly were no longer intimidated by these know-it-all church kids. And they were able to give their own opinion. They were able to think and to express themselves. And it was just a tremendous blessing. And there are kids today who came out of that who are in the ministry. And I'm sure that that played a very big role. It opened the Bible to them. It opened not just church and their fellowship and all that, but it opened the Bible to them. So yes, if it's important to you to learn, you can learn it. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this time is called Bible Talk. Now, you have a better idea, let me know. And I'll look at it, I'll study it out. I'm not married to that name. I like it, and I'm going to stick with it until something better comes along. But if you have something better, let me know. I'll make the final decision on that, but I want to know what you think. So that's it for today. Now, have you enjoyed this podcast today? If so, why not subscribe if you haven't already subscribed? I'm still learning this, but I'm still excited about it, still learning, I'm enjoying the whole process. So right down below here, you have the opportunity to subscribe to this channel. Now, by subscribing, you not only ensure that you have access to both my podcasts, Christian News and Views, and becoming a published author is fun, which is for those who want to write. Christians, if you're a Christian and you want to write, hey, I give out free information there that you can use now. But not only that, you encourage me, and that may or may not be important to you, but it is important to me. So I then encourage you to subscribe, and I will do all in my power to create episodes that will inform, encourage, and inspire you. That is my promise to you. So thank you for viewing, and I will see you in the next episode.